Did you shorten my life now? I want to retire and enjoy it. How are we going to enjoy it? You burned me. Your company stinks because they're not watching what's going on. Workers don't pay attention nowadays. Supervisors make workers work. You got to do something about this.
We basically nuked a town with chemicals so we could get a railroad open. I was kind of surprised that when they quickly told the people they can go back home, but then said if they feel like they want their homes tested, they can have them tested. I would have far rather they did all the testing.
The workers have had it, and the pandemic has spurred something on. It's not just in the rail unions, but across the country. We're all tired of being treated like, garbage, and we're not going to take it anymore.
Sure, I'm Jerad Cassity. I'm the alternate National Legislative Director and Chief of Safety for Smart Transportation Division.
Welcome to the show. This is Steve Zeltzer. Why don't you talk about what is going on there and your concern as a railroad union person who's been fighting for health and safety for the workers and the communities?
Yeah, so right now, obviously, there's a lot of cleanup, a lot of concern being shown to the citizens. Some of that's a little frustrating for us because it's all after the fact. And, the railroad was able to get its tracks established and trains moving quite quickly. And, so now you're seeing the more, lack of a better term, compassionate side, if you will, finally coming out. But the reality of it is we have a very nasty mess that was very disruptive to the folks of East Palestine, and we've got a lot of uncertainty, a lot of concern with what's left, and so for the site itself, it's still pretty destroyed, if you will, heavily damaged. There's still a lot of cars that are present, and there's a lot of turned up soil, and so to speak of the location directly, it's still a pretty nasty site. Our concerns as railroad workers and as the members that we represent, we're basically sounding the alarm that nothing has changed in the 2 weeks since it's occurred, and if nothing changes, this is going to happen again. We cannot walk away from this in the United States of America saying it's okay to have a derailment on this level or of this nature. It's pretty obvious that we have a car that had an axle that was defective and was on fire. And my fear at this point is that we're going to focus on that singular item of the derailment and not talk about all the other things that are going on in the railroad industry that are driving things to happen like this defective car. And so, it's important to me that we keep the conversation going about how the industry has been trending in the last 6 years, ever since precision scheduled railroading has been implemented, and really all the cuts that have been made to make folks in the C-suites and Wall Street a lot richer, while the dangers are becoming much more realistic for not just the employees but the public. And our biggest takeaway and our biggest alarm here is if we're not careful, this is going to happen again. We predicted this derailment. We knew it was coming. Obviously, we didn't know exactly when or where, but we knew something bad was around the corner. And at this point, all we can do is predict it's going to happen again.
And the fact that the railroad companies have been pushing for a one-person train, this train was over 1.5 miles long, and they cut back the staffing, this precision staffing, so railroad workers can't even have sick days. Why is this being allowed by the U.S. government?
I had that answer. Yeah, when PSR came in, basically there was just a heavy-handed removal of 30% of the workforce. I mean, there was no strategy or really thought-out plan to what the idea or game was for the folks. It was just a matter of we're going to cut as far as we can cut. As long as we're still making money, that's the goal. We need to make more money. We're going to do it with less people, kind of like bleeding a turnip. They're going to make you work more often. They're going to keep you out there longer. We do have hours of service laws, but they're running us up to the edge of those hours of service limits almost every single trip now, and they're constantly turning you. They're wearing you out. And then you don't have sick leave. They introduced attendance policies, again, under PSR that were just draconian in nature, that anything that you do, no matter what it is, if you have a legitimate sickness and you take time off, they're assessing points against you. And those points, in essence, are discipline, because once you get to a certain level, you're terminated. And you have this hanging over your head all the time. And now if you're a parent like I am, I'm a father. Let's say if I know that my child was graduating high school and I'm going to have that time off, and I get sick, because I know I'm going to get points to experience a special life moment with my family, I'm going to go to work sick, because I don't want to get fired for failing my family, or I don't want to fail my family, to take care of the sickness. So I go to work sick to make sure I'm able to do the things I should do as a spouse, as a parent, and how it's been allowed to go on the way it has, I don't have an answer for, but I can tell you that we've tried negotiating sick leave for a very long time, and the railroads have fought us on it every single step of the way. And, finally we're getting some traction. But it had to take all of this just to get them to budge, and it's extremely frustrating.
And you just had an experience, or we did in this country, with the Railroad Labor Act, which is being used to prevent workers from taking strike action, not only for the railroads but the airlines. Were you surprised that the Congress passed a bill basically implementing a contract with no sick days?
I was surprised. We really thought we were going to get there. We thought we were going to get there on the Hill, and then unfortunately, it turned out to be what it was, and it was quite disappointing. I'm thankful to Senator Sanders for keeping the push alive and not letting this go away. There is some legislation, from the way we understand it, that is forthcoming, more than likely out of the House first. But, I think in a roundabout way, we're finally going to get there, but there certainly have been bumps in the road.
And one of the issues about the situation of railway workers is, and other workers for that matter, in transportation and many other industries, is a fear of retaliation if they report health and safety dangers. Is there a concern in your members that if they report a health and safety concern, they're going to get retaliated against and they're going to lose their job, basically, and that's another reason that people are afraid to even report things that are a problem?
Yeah, without question, we have a very real problem with harassment, intimidation, and with retaliation in this industry. Our folks are terrified to report injuries if they get injured, because they know it's ultimately probably going to cost them their job, even if it's not a career-ending injury. Chances are the railroad is going to try to fire them for some sort of rules violation when they got hurt. And, so there's a disincentive for even really trying to report your own injuries, because people are legitimately scared of it. But then on the other end, if we report safety concerns about things that are inherently dangerous, typically some of the more minor stuff really isn't that big a deal. But if you get into reporting concerns that you have that are problematic for managers or even the railroad itself, yes, you face an intense amount of pressure, and it's usually done through stuff like operating testing. The regulations require that the railroads test us while we're out performing tasks or on line of duty, and they watch us and they observe you, and it's not like it's a kind and peaceful experience. Like, they literally will hide in the weeds and watch you with binoculars, or they'll have drones and they'll fly drones over your head and use the camera to watch everything that you do and record everything that you do. And you know they're just sitting there watching you, waiting to catch you do one thing wrong so that they can find a reason to write you up and charge you with a rule violation. And these are the kind of things that our folks face day in and day out, and rather than deal with the consequences of trying to improve the industry. I do know the railroads like to say they have programs that you can report and do all these things, but while they exist, they're not. It's not a welcoming experience. Let me say it that way. You never feel like the railroad wants to hear your input when it comes to unsafe conditions, especially not when it comes to injuries, and it's a very real problem.
And Norfolk Southern used to win a lot of awards for many years as the best employer for health and safety.
Yeah, they won what's called the Harriman Award, and they were the best, the most safest railroad. I hired on in 2005, and that was in their string of consecutive victories, if you will, in getting the Harriman Award for being the safest railroad. And then somewhere along the way, they've just done a complete about face, and it's not about safety. It's about profit. It's about making sure that their operating ratio is going lower and lower than it ever has before. And anything else that's a side effect is irrelevant or not a priority to them. As long as that magic number is giving them ability to make more money via their bonus structure and more money on Wall Street back to their shareholders.
And I understand that some workers were fired for reporting an injury, and that was one of the ways that they won that award. You know, that they were getting rid of firing workers who got injured or had to go to a doctor for drugs and that kind of thing. Is that true?
I don't know that I can answer that factually. It would not surprise me, but I honestly I can't answer that with certainty.
Now, under the law, I mean, workers are supposed to be protected who report health and safety violations through OSHA and through government whistleblower protection program. What's been your experience of oversight by OSHA and federal agencies to protect your members and other railroad workers?
So the OSHA relationship is actually a little tricky in the railroad industry because OSHA has very little jurisdiction on the physical infrastructure, unlike other workplaces. Now, that being said, they do have the jurisdiction when it comes to the whistleblower piece, but it's not real crystal clear for the members or the employees on how to use that. We do have attorneys that are much more versed in trying, and or at least get out and educate us, I should say, talk about the whistleblowers and how it works. But even then, the problem is if you report an injury or you report an unsafe condition, and you get harassed or intimidated or fired, you're talking about a lot of loss of money for some time before it's able to get through the whistleblower provisions or the process to let it play out. And so that deterrent is also there because if I do this and they come after me, I'm going to be out of work for a year or 2 years. And if it's whistleblower, it may even be 3 years. And so you're going to lose that much income coming in while you're waiting on a judge to make a ruling that you're not sure if it's going to be in your favor or not. And you're tasked with sacrificing a lot in the hopes that someone will see your side. And so it speaks to the difficulties and the fears of how this really works with our members.
And I mean, have you ever heard of an incident where there's a rail accident and they dump dangerous toxins into a hole and then burn it? I mean, it sounds really dangerous for the people and the communities.
Yeah, I've never experienced what they did in East Palestine in my railroad career, or even in my time in the role that I'm in with safety. We have a lot of questions with that, and we have questions for the NTSB. We have questions for PHMSA. We have a lot of questions and a lot of concerns on how they handled that hazardous material, because there is a pressure on the railroad to pick up the mess as quickly as possible to get those trains running again. And we certainly hope that is not the case here, but we are wondering.
And the oversight of health and safety in the railroads, it sounds like there's systemic problems which you've been addressing. The Railroad Workers United have called for nationalization of the railroads. They don't believe that these companies can be trusted to run the rails properly. What's your view about that?
I've put a little thought into this, and I understand their desire to do that. I understand the frustration and the anger with the railroads and the want to kind of hurt the railroads back because of how much harm and damage they've done to our folks. My biggest concern with turning it over to the government is that the infrastructure would fall into the same categories or priorities as the existing infrastructure that we have now. I mean, our federal interstate system, our federal bridges, they're all deficient. And as much as I would like to see the railroads get retribution or get penalized in a way that really would sink in, and I think the nationalization would do that, I don't think overall that it's good for the infrastructure as a whole in this nation when it comes to the rail system, because we're lacking where the federal government already governs the infrastructure, and I think it would be more of a deterrent, unfortunately, to the rail system. We should be asking questions about breaking up monopolies or duopolies, and other ways to fine them and penalize them that has greater impact than what it has now, because what's going on now is not working. But to go directly after the nationalization, I work in D.C. Part of my job is lobbying rail safety. I just don't see a government that can come across the aisle to agree enough to make sure that the railroad is running in a way that's sustainable. And for that reason, I'm not supportive.
And I mean, it seems like the transportation system is in dire straits. It's not just the railroads. The meltdown, Southwest Airlines, where they wouldn't put money into the software. It sounds like we're facing a critical situation with our entire transportation structure.
Yeah, we are, and I think we as a country need to start demanding these companies to spend money where they need to spend money instead of doing it in stock buybacks and exuberant bonus packages and things of that nature. I mean, there is so much money that are going to individuals when it should be coming back into the system for improvements. And I don't have the direct answer on how to do that, but I'd like to think in the United States of America that we could put rules and limits in place that would ascertain that we're being fair to the workers. I mean, we need to bring about the middle class, one, but two, we need to make sure that these companies are investing in themselves for the purpose of safety. Just like Southwest. I mean, there's no reason they should have had that meltdown, just like the NOTAM issue that's going on right now with the airline industry altogether. They make these crazy amounts of money off the citizens of the United States of America, but then they just give it to 3 or 4 people instead of actually putting it back to the system where it needs to be used. That's true in aviation. It's true in railroading. And I think, as the citizens go, we need to start demanding parity or a fair process in how we look at the financial handouts that are coming off the backs of all of these workers. And so, I don't know the direct answer there, but I do feel like we have got to start driving and demanding that these industries and these corporations change their practices and prioritize the people before the executives and the shareholders.
And did you meet with people in Palestine, and what did they say to you?
I did not get to meet with anybody, unfortunately. It was a very quick trip. My Ohio State Legislative Director has been there to meet with them, and there is a lot of fear, a lot of concern, a lot of uncertainty at this point. They really don't know what's safe and what isn't. They're wondering if their house or their homes are even safe to inhabit or live in at this point, and it's just really sad to see an entire community upended because of a railroad industry that has deprioritized inspections and deprioritized safety as a whole in the name of making more money. We've got trains that are growing longer and longer. With longer trains, you have heavier trains, and we have less inspections, less quality of inspections have deteriorated under PSR. And you put all of these factors together, and you've got this long, oversized, overweight train, not technically overweight, but just for the argument that I'm making for safety purposes, it's a longer train than it should be. It's a heavier train than it should be. Very good chance that it wasn't inspected properly, if at all. And now all of these people are just forced out of their homes or left wondering if they're even safe to breathe the air. And it's not fair. I mean, it's not fair to them. My heart breaks for them. And it's terrifying to look and see this community and know that it may happen again and sooner than later, because we have got to make systemic changes to improve the overall health and safety of the railroad industry. And that goes all the way from sick leave to regulations to new legislation. I mean, we need a lot of help to right the ship.
Okay, well, I want to thank you very much for joining us on WorkWeek, and hopefully railroad workers and communities will be able to solve this systemic problem of having safe transportation on our rails in the United States. So thanks for joining us.